Good morning, everyone, and welcome to week number 5. So I won't spend too much time on the intro. We've done 4 weeks of this, right? So this is the last week. Three last systems: respiratory, digestive, and urinary. You have access to the lectures. What I do here is kind of an overview, condensed review, right? So that's why these are quite short. But they are very useful to you because they do condense the information. There's a lot of information in terms of the book readings, in terms of the videos, right? The lectures. So this is an overview, right? I'm not re-lecturing, right? I'm just kind of emphasizing and focusing on key things, key concepts I want you to know. Um, I'm not sure if I said this before, right? But if I were you, I'd probably watch my this review, before taking any quizzes or exams, right? That's probably a good idea. All right, let's get started. All right, so respiratory system, right? And here's it's compared to cardiovascular. What is transporting through hemoglobin? As you remember from the previous week, hemoglobin binds to oxygen, oxygen binds to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is found in red blood cells, and that is carried throughout the body. The respiratory system has to do more with the exchange, right? The oxygen, CO2, inhalation and exhalation, right? So that's more of the external respiration, right? And what I want you to know, which is bolded here, spirometer, meter in terms of a suffix means instrument to measure, and spiro breathing, right? Spirometer is a device that measures the volume and flow of air during inspiration and expiration. Inspiration, also known as inhalation; expiration, also known as exhalation, right? What's measuring this, right? The volume of air inhaled, the volume of air that stays in the lung after breathing out, and the volume of air exhaling is measured by an instrument called the spirometer. Let's move on. Another comparison here. So yeah, so I briefly said it. Involved with external respiration. Respiratory system has to do with external respiration, taking oxygen in, blowing CO2 out. And that's what I meant by external respiration. So I think the word exchange belongs more to internal, right? Although you are breathing in O2 and breathing out CO2 to avoid confusion, right? Exchange in terms of delivering oxygen to a tissue and then transporting CO2, which is waste, back to the lungs. That is internal respiration. So, what did I bold here? So, internal respiration is the process of respiration that includes the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen between the cells and the lymph surrounding them. Right? That's what I want you to know. That's internal respiration. And what I just mentioned before, what I alluded to was breathing in, breathing out. That's more external respiration, which has to do with the atmosphere. I think in a previous lecture, I mentioned, the atmosphere is composed mainly of nitrogen, actually, guys. Over 75%, whereas oxygen's over 20%, about 21% or so. But oxygen's in group 6, nitrogen's group 5. And what that means is oxygen is a better electron acceptor, which has to do with production of energy in the mitochondria, right? Oxidative phosphorylation. So, make a flashcard of what's bolded. Should know that by now, right? Whatever I bold, know it. Here we go into the paranasal sinuses. Clinically, this can get inflamed and tender upon palpation or percussion, right? There's four sinuses, right? Paranasal, which means besides the nasal, which is the nose. So the ethmoid, right? Part of the ethmoid, right, is called a turbinate or nasal concave. And they're responsible for increasing the surface area of the nasal cavity, causing turbulence. Why do we need turbulence? Well, we need turbulence to be able to trap air particles, right? Air is not exactly pure, guys. There's a lot of dust particles. So by increasing the turbulence, you're kind of increasing resistance, decreasing that free airflow, and that allows the nasal cavity to trap dust particles easier. Right. So the turbinates are increasing turbulence, increasing the surface area, which causes turbulence. Know that? Make a flashcard. Let's move on. If I'm putting a diagram, that means know the diagram, right? So nose, nasopharynx. In the nasopharynx, there is a structure called the adenoid, which I mentioned before. That's your pharyngeal tonsil. Oropharynx, which is what you swab in terms of throat culture, and laryngopharynx, which is then continuous with the larynx. Here's the larynx. The pharynx, by the way, is your throat, right? All three of these. The larynx is the voice box, right? Epiglottis is the flap closing the esophagus every time we eat. So food doesn't go through the wrong pipe. And the wrong pipe would be the windpipe, which is the trachea. We want it to go to that other pipe called the esophagus. Know the lungs, know the bronchus, right? Here's where it bifurcates, right, around the thoracic floor. And that's called the carinae. Anyway, no bronchus. Know the alveoli, right, the air sacs where actual exchange takes place. And know the diaphragm over here, which is separating the thoracic from the abdominal cavity. And it's critical in terms of the process of inhalation. Let's move on. Digestive system question. So what this slide is basically saying is the pancreas is exocrine and endocrine. To your surprise, the pancreas is actually more exocrine than endocrine. Why would that be surprising? Because there's about 30 million diabetics in the US, and that has to do with insulin. Insulin's very popular, right? Here you go, insulin, beta cells, right, make insulin. Didn't we cover that last week? Yes, we did. Anyway, I think you had a question on glucagon, right? That increases blood glucose. But the pancreas is mainly exocrine. About 80% of the pancreas and about 20% is endocrine, right? So the digestive part of the pancreas would be the exocrine part. Exocrine, by definition, means it's releasing a substance through a duct. It's not always an enzyme, right? Sweat, sweat, tears, right? Although it carries lysozyme, but sweat as a substance isn't an enzyme. So it carries a substance, it secretes a substance through and releases it through a duct. Endocrine doesn't have a duct. Endocrine releases through the bloodstream directly. The exocrine would go into a lumen or surface, right? What I need you to know is not the name of this, right? The duct of Wirsung. I think anatomy textbooks are staying away from eponyms or structures named after scientists. But anyway, the major pancreatic duct, I wrote both names. And that is going to contain the pancreatic digestive juices that are carried by the duct of Wirsung into the duodenum. Right? So that being the second part of the duodenum, right? So second part's the descending. Anyway, it goes through the duct into the duodenum. Know that. Make a flashcard of it. Let's move on. A few questions here. So, what's below the ileocecal valve blind pouch called the cecum? Know that cirrhosis is a chronic progressive inflammatory disease that permanently damages the liver, right? A lot of scarring can be secondary to conditions like hepatitis C. An important function of the colon is to regulate the body's water balance. So the small intestine's main function is absorption of nutrients, right, through microvilli, which is, I believe, another question you have to know. But the large intestine is mainly to elimination, right? Large intestine has bacteria. Bacteria helps to break down food. It's a part of feces, a big part of feces, right? And it still absorbs, water and fiber, which is why you need to increase both to increase elimination, right? But anyway, the important function of the colon, which is the large intestine, is to help regulate the body's water balance. And last one, enteritis is inflammation of the intestine caused by bacterial or viral infection. So here we're talking about gastroenteritis, right? Inflammation of the stomach and the intestine. Know this diagram, right? The upper lip, the labial frenulum, the gingiva, hard palate, know the soft palate, know the uvula. Know the surface of the tongue, know the labial frenum, lower lip, lingual frenulum, right? Know this diagram, guys, for the exam. Kidney question, acute kidney failure condition where there's a gradual loss of function of the nephron. So nephron is the functional unit of the kidney, which is made by renal corpuscle, which includes the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, and the renal tubules with the proximal convoluted tubule, the lip of Henle, and the distal convoluted tubule. I think you have to know that as well. But anyway, know this, it's bullet acute kidney failure, right? Renal corpuscle, as I just broke it down, Bowman's capsule contains the glomerulus, and increase in blood pressure in the capillaries causes a plasma-like fluid to flow from the blood in the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. Oh, so plasma-like fluid, plasma protein would be albumin, and this is critical because in renal failure, specifically nephrotic syndrome, you do get albumin in urine, right? So that's important for that reason. The concept of that, but here we're talking about an increase in blood pressure, right? So which would be an increase of hydrostatic pressure. If you remember that slide from before, not this lecture, but weeks ago. Increasing blood pressure in the capillaries causes plasma-like fluid to flow from the blood in the glomerulus into the Bowman's capsule. All right. Let's move on there. Know this diagram. Know the hilum, which is where the renal vein, artery, and ureter insert. That's the vena cava, as you know from last week. That's the aorta bifurcating into the common carotids. Common iliacs, sorry. It's really early in the morning, right? Common iliacs, which turn into the external and internal iliacs, guys, right? So know all these, the adrenal gland, which is sitting on top of the kidney, know the hilum, know the aorta, ureter, here's the bladder. I think you have to know the urethra as well. All right. Apocrine versus merocrine, these are exocrine glands, right? So apocrine glands, right, it talks about the armpit, groin, clitoris, labia minora. And it's more viscous. Anyway, puberty is a period of sexual maturation and achievement of fertility, right? So that's the concept here behind this one. Know what puberty is. That's one of your reproductive questions. Here's the sperm pathway, right? Seminiferous tubules actually produce sperm, right? And the scrotum contains the testes that travels into the epididymis, responsible for sperm maturation, vas deferens, which transports sperm ejaculatory duct, which then combines with seminal fluid, right, which is mainly by the seminal vesicle, right? Secondly, by the prostate, and to a lower extent, the Cowper's gland, also known as bulbourethral gland. That'll leads into the urethra, right? And ejection, right? So during ejaculation, semen is expelled to the outside of the male body through the urethra. Know that, and know that the scrotum contains the testes. It would also be a good idea to know the flow, right? Know how sperm flows, right? Sperm pathway. A few things here. This is going over the this uh, flow chart I made. It's going over the hormone negative feedback, right? Producing estrogen, progesterone in women, FSH, right, and LH. Latex condom is the only contraceptive method that also provides some protection against sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS, right? Know that. Rhythm form of contraception must be coordinated carefully with the woman's menstrual cycle in order to be effective. Right? The rhythm form. An ectopic pregnancy occurs when a fertilized egg implants itself in the fallopian tube instead of the uterus. Right. So fertilization should take place in the fallopian tube and the ampulla, and about 6 days later, it travels. It's already in the uterus, travels to the uterus, and implantation takes place. Right. Um. So if implantation does not occur in the uterus, but it occurs in the fallopian tube, that would be an ectopic pregnancy. EC means outside, TOP means location, outside the location. IC means pertaining to. All right, know this diagram, know the fundus of the uterus, know the cervix, right there, know the vaginal canal, right, know the ovary right there. There's a diagram on that, and know the diagram of the male reproductive. What you want to know is basically that sperm pathway I gave you. So know the seminal vesicle, know the epididymis, right? Did they label it? Yes, they did. All right. So, well, yeah, let's leave that for later. All right. So the testicle there, which contains the seminiferous tubules, according to your slide, right? And then that travels into the epididymis. Then that goes through the vas deferens over here. And then turns into the ejaculatory duct. And then it receives secretions from the seminal vesicle, the prostate, and the Cowper's gland, which is bulbourethral gland, and eventually dumps into the urethra, right, for the ejection. FSH and LH in men, right? Know what's bolded here. The Leydig cells, interstitial cells, produce testosterone. The male sex hormone is called testosterone, right? Know that. Um, and here's a comparison: urinary system, cardiovascular, and digestive. The process of adding certain substances to the urine so they can be excreted from the body is called secretion, right? Know that definition. The urinary system basically reabsorbs, it secretes, and it excretes, right? So the initial absorption of nutrients takes place by the small intestine. Then the kidneys have to make a decision on, do we reabsorb, right? Keep it in the bloodstream, or do we excrete or eliminate through urine, which is waste, right? Um, and of course, adding substances to the urine would be called secretion. So 90% of the fluid that comprises filtrate is reabsorbed into the bloodstream. So reabsorb about 99% of things. The 1% would be things like urea, which is nitrogenous waste. And nitrogenous waste, guys, it's toxic, right? So kidney impairment we would lose our ability to make urine, lose our ability to excrete nitrogenous waste, lose our ability to excrete toxic waste, and therefore that would become toxic. Severe kidney failure would then therefore be life threatening. And that's why we need to separate nitrogenous waste from blood in a process called dialysis. All right, let's move on, guys. All right, lung capacity. Oh, I need to move this out of the way. All right, so tachypnea is an abnormally rapid and shallow rate of breathing. Tachy means fast, pnea means breathing, right? Fast breathing. The purpose of residual air in the lungs is to allow the continuous exchange of gases between breaths, right? Residual volume is the amount of air that remains in the lung after exhaling, right? And some conditions like emphysema, right, which is a COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, there's an increase in residual volume, right? So they want you to know what's the purpose, right? Residual air is to allow continuous exchange of gases between breath, right? Overinflation of the lung during inhalation is prevented by the stimulation of nerve endings in the walls of the lungs. Indeed, I think that's a reflex called the Herring-Buer reflex that's mediated by the vagus nerve, which is cranial nerve number 10, right? Know the three things here that are bolded. Here, microvilli. All right, so I kept saying the small intestines where absorption takes place, but the specifics on how the absorption takes place is it's possible because it's the lining of the small intestine is not smooth, right? But composed of projections, which are called microvilli, right? Containing blood and lymph capillaries, right? So absorption takes place in the small intestine mainly, and it's due to these structures called the microvilli. Small intestine is simple columnar, by the way, right? So it's not smooth, guys. It has these structures called microvilli, these projections, right? So muscles of respiration, inspiration, forced expiration, and both, right? Know that yawning is a deep, prolonged breath that fills the lungs, believed to be caused by the need to increase the level of oxygen in the blood, right? So we have, inhalation, which is mainly passive, guys, right? The diaphragm has an involuntary component to it, right? So the inhalation, breathing in, is kind of passive. The second reason is we have a negative air pressure, right? So air pressure is about 760 millimeters per mercury. The lung is slightly negative prior to inhalation. So that combined by the fact that the diaphragm has an involuntary component to it um, would, um, you know, would make inhalation mainly a passive process. Anyway, that's forced exhalation, right? And that's both intercom for both inspiration expiration. No, the yawning, right, is a deep, prolonged breath that fills the lungs, believed to be caused by the need to increase the level of oxygen in blood. Urine sequence, kidneys, goes to the ureter, goes to the bladder, right, and then goes to the urethra. Oop, made a mistake, guys. Here, this should be urethra. Kidney, ureter, bladder, and urethra. All right, make that correction, guys. This should be the urethra. All right. Sleep, right? Different cycles. The most serious potential consequence of sleep apnea is strain on the cardiovascular system. Right. So stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. Stage 1 has I think these are theta waves, right? And then we have stage 2, right? And that arousal is difficult. So that should be spindles, sleep spindles, right? And then stage 3 should be, yeah, that's where the delta waves start, right? And then stage 4, right? There you go. Pleurisy is inflammation of the membranes that cover the lung. So the membranes covering the lung is basically the visceral pleura, guys. The parietal pleura cover the lines of the thoracic cavity. So pleurisy is talking about the visceral pleura. And inflammation of the visceral pleura is called pleurisy. Respiratory system, pharyngitis, pharyngo means pharynx, which means throat, is inflammation of the throat caused by bacteria or viruses, right? Strep throat it's commonly caused by strep pyogenes, so it's a gram-positive bacteria, and that's why we would, um, you know, swab the throat. All right, guys, looks like we are done here. Quick review, right? Of course, you have access to the PowerPoint itself, so make sure you read the PowerPoint, right? And make sure you make flashcards on what I just bolded. So I was very careful not to re-lecture or re-teach something because you have all that material. But this is a way of condensing the material and telling you what to focus on. Um, what's been true since week one is every time I bold something or I put a diagram on it, on the slide, know the diagram, know what's bolded. All right. It's helping you kind of with time management, it's helping you condense the information so you can study it better. All right, guys. I'll see you later. Thank you very much. I'll make this available immediately. Thank you so much.